He's a famous animator, and here's a picture of him with his most famous creation. I think I don't need to explain that. So, his full name is Ub Iwerks, weird spelling. He's the son of a Dutch immigrant who came to the United States. He was born in Kansas City, like all great animators of the time, in 1901. His father had come from a Dutch community in northwest Germany, and when he took a job in the United States, he patented several ideas for camera technology, and that gave Ub an early interest in animation. But when Ub was 14, his father just mysteriously vanished, so he had to drop out of school because his father was the sole provider, so he decided to get a job. Yeah. So he was really good at art. He just was like an art prodigy from a really young age, so he joined the Pesman Rubin Art Studio in 1919, and this is where he met his best friend, Walt Disney. I'm sure you haven't heard of him because he's not really famous now. So Iwerks is considered by many to be like Disney's oldest friend. They were like this. So Disney and Iwerks, when the studio shut down, they would form their own art studio. Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists, but there was like a lack of clients that needed art, so the firm ended up going bankrupt really quickly. So then they found work as illustrators for the Kansas City Slide newspaper company, later renamed the Kansas City Film Ad Company, and here's a picture. So Iwerks and Disney are probably somewhere in here, but I couldn't really find where. And while working there, Disney decided to take up work in animation. It was there where he watched some cartoons. He's like, wow, I want to do that. And Iwerks, being Disney's loyal follower, soon joined him on his endeavor. So this led to the creation of the Laugh-O-Gram Studio, Disney's first ever animation business. Iwerks became his chief animator. So here's Disney, here's Iwerks. They're like basically our age right now, like teenagers about to become adults. And so in 1921, Disney was contracted to animate 12 cartoons from the Newman's Theater, and these were called Newman's Laugh-O-Grams. And despite the low income that they generated per film, Laugh-O-Grams was able to produce most of the requested cartoons. So encouraged by the popularity of other cartoons, such as like Aesop's Fables, Felix the Cat, Out of the Inkwell, Walt Disney decided to make his own animated versions of fairy tales. So I think there's one on like Little Red Riding Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, stuff like that. And this was a time when the Laugh-O-Gram Studio started to expand and hire more people. So Ub was joined by several other animation pioneers, including Hugh Harman, Friz Freleng, and Carmen Maxwell, all of which would later go on to found Looney Tunes in 1930.
Yes.
And the company had problems since they had little income. And finally, Walt had to face the facts and file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1923. So he basically came right back when where he started. However, the last Laugh-O-Gram film, called Alice's Wonderland, was a technological masterpiece by those standards, as it took a live-action character named Alice and then put her in a cartoon world, which was considered really avant-garde for the time. And Disney sent this to Hollywood to a producer named Margaret Winkler, who was kind of known for starting the careers of other animation pioneers. And she loved it so much that she invited Disney and then eventually Iwerks to go to Hollywood, and Winkler gave them a studio, and they actually produced with a higher budget now. So he traveled to live with his uncle Robert and his brother Roy, and then Iwerks was eventually persuaded to come afterwards. And the later shorts apparently had bad quality, as in they lost their original Alice actor, and then the new actor wasn't really, or actress, and the new actress wasn't really doing that good of a job. And so the Winkler canceled the shorts, but they weren't out of the game yet. So Disney confronted Iwerks, and he was like, hey, Ub, buddy, could you come up with a new character? So Ub decides to create this cartoon rabbit, and then under Winkler Pictures, which was under Universal Pictures. So Universal ended up putting all these names in a hat, and they drew one, and the thing that came out was Oswald. So they decided to name the new character Oswald. Hence we get Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. So the first Oswald cartoon was actually completely animated by Iwerks himself. So talk about like hard work, right? And this is honestly the first time in Disney's and Iwerks' career in which they actually got profits instead of just breaking even. So I think the Oswald income allowed Iwerks to invest in stone mills to crush paint pigments, and those later paint formulas would be used by animators, and they would just become like standard things when color was adapted for the screen. So Walt Disney Studios grew to a staff of nearly 20. There are more people coming in, and and that was drawn by Iwerks, I believe. So in the spring of 1928, Disney traveled to New York studio to meet with his boss, Charles Mintz, because he felt he wasn't being paid enough for the Oswald cartoons. I mean, they were really good, and he wasn't really getting that much money considering the quality of the Oswald cartoons. And while there, Mintz basically gives him the middle finger, basically saying that since the common practice at the time was that the animation, the Universal would not the animators owned Oswald, so there's really nothing Disney could have done about it. And Disney obviously is like super pissed that he didn't get the recognition, he didn't get the money he deserved, and also behind Disney's back, Mintz has secretly hired all of the Disney staff over to his own animation studio, but the only person who refused to go was Ub Iwerks. So really everything, the only people left at Disney were just himself, Ub, and his brother Roy, and that was it. So Disney decided to quit and create his own character that he actually obtained the rights to. So obviously creating a character takes a lot of hard work and a lot of originality. So Disney was really lucky to have a talented Ub on the team. So Ub Iwerks tried to sketch frogs, dogs, cats, but Disney didn't really like any of these. I forget why. And then he also created a female cow and a male horse, which would later be adapted into future Disney characters. But Iwerks finally took inspiration from an old drawing during the Laugh-O-Gram era with Disney with sketches of mice, since Disney always loved to feed the mice at the Laugh-O-Gram studio. So it was finally decided they would create a mouse. And then when it finally came to naming the character, it was Disney's wife Lillian that actually suggested the name Mickey. So that is how Mickey Mouse was born. So the first Mickey Mouse cartoon, Plain Crazy, was released on May 15th, 1928, aka today, which makes Mickey Mouse 90 years old, I believe. It was completely animated by Iwerks, and this is a very impressive animation feat because it took about 4,000 drawings and was completed in 2 weeks. So Iwerks created an average of 700 drawings per day, all by himself. Unfortunately, it wasn't really, famous, so then there was Steamboat Willie, and then Mickey Mouse became famous. Yay! So, Ub's early Mickey Mouse cartoons were kind of the opposite of one would expect. The kind of gags that were used were called by others as barnyard humor, as not really suitable for general audiences. So, there's a lot of innuendos in the old Ub Iwerks cartoons that you wouldn't see in modern cartoons. So for example, Mickey smoked, Mickey drank, and what we see here is the development of Ub's animation style. Very unrealistic, very bouncy and round, as in not playing by the rules. Rules being just general decency. So to recap, Disney did not create Mickey Mouse. Ub Iwerks did. Yeah. So, Ub Iwerks and the recently hired composer Carl Starling, who would eventually go on to create music for Looney Tunes, had come up with the idea to synchronize sound for cartoons. And this was kind of revolutionary in that it was, and also kind of hard in that the characters on screen also had to interact with music, and that required precise timing, coordination, and it was just a new element to animation together, which kind of just expanded the possibilities. So the entire project was called Silly Symphonies, And Disney was really intrigued by that, so he commissioned Iwerks and Stalling to create a cartoon, which later became The Skeleton Dance, which is the source of the meme Spooky Scary Skeletons, I'm aware. But if you think about it, it was a really good animation masterpiece. I would think so, because of all the dancing and the fact that they had to coordinate to the music. So they were originally created to experiment with the new animation processes, so some of the... It was kind of experimental, so some of the things might not actually been like effective or might have just been outright weird, but you have to imagine that since it's first, it's kind of innovative. So sound was provided by the Cinephone system, provided by another upstart company called Celebrity Pictures, and that was led by a man named Pat Powers. You're going to want to remember that name. So in 1930, Iwerks found himself working more and more with Disney to satisfy Walt Disney's demands, and then eventually the conditions just became intolerable. Like, he couldn't possibly satisfy what Disney wanted. So I also felt that he didn't really receive the credit that he deserved for his cartoons. I mean, he was like the main guy. He was like the boss. It's like the animation god right now, but he's not getting the credit like Disney. I mean, you've heard of Disney, but you haven't really heard of Iwerks, which is a real shame. So finally, Iwerks and Disney's friendship was rocked when Iwerks accepted an offer from Pat Powers to just leave Disney and start his own animation studio. And the reason why is that he got a salary of, I think, $300 a week, which is like a lot bigger than what Disney could offer at the time. So it seems to many initially that like if Iwerks went away from Disney, that Disney would be totally done for. But luckily Disney was able to hire other staff, so the Mickey Mouse cartoons kept coming. So the Iwerks studio opened later in 1930, and Iwerks' first new character was named Flip the Frog. This is his first original idea, and this is probably his most famous creation outside of Mickey Mouse. The first cartoon that Iwerks made with his new studio was Fiddlesticks, and this already was an animation feat, and that was the first cartoon to be both in sound and color, although it's not. It was made by Technicolor, but not the three strip Technicolor. It's just a 2-strip. So the flip cartoons were released by MGM and then Celebrity Pictures. And almost immediately, the Iwerks studio began attracting new talent, and eventually the who's who of animation basically came to the Iwerks studio. For example, Grim Natwick, the guy who created Betty Boop, Seamus Culhane, the future director of the Woody Woodpecker cartoons, and Chuck Jones, the future director of all those Looney Tunes cartoons. So Natwick redesigned Flip to become more human-like, and it's really interesting that since Ub Iwerks created Mickey Mouse, he also created a character that was the exact opposite of Mickey Mouse, and you'll see that eventually. Let's see. So yeah, the Flip cartoons are super interesting because these plots feature ordinary problems of depression, for example, poverty, unemployment. The Flip the Frog cartoons are kind of like a satirical, making fun of depression society. And that was just really attractive to audiences at the time, just making fun of ordinary life. And they're super action-packed, and they have like really good music because of Carl Stalling. He's super talented. And there's not a lot of singing and dancing. It's kind of like mature cartoons for like audiences that are bored of just that stereotypical Mickey Mouse singing and dancing. So yeah, Flip the Frog would probably be best characterized as an anti-hero. So by 1933, Flip the Frog had basically worn out his welcome, and it wasn't really that popular anymore. So Iwerks decided to replace it with an imaginative liar named Willy Whopper. So he would, like, at the beginning of every short, he'd be like, did I ever tell you about the time something happened? And it's like some big adventure, and then, yeah. So there was basically like a boy version of Flip who later kind of developed into this roly-poly southern kid. And this is where Iwerks took... Iwerks once again released a couple shorts in Cinecolor, which is basically like Technicolor, except it's not. It's another 2-color process, and then the Willy Whopper shorts became very more vibrant and aesthetic, and it kind of approaches what is now considered to be like a modern cartoon. So Willy Whopper wore out his welcome shorter than Flip did, so MGM eventually dropped Iwerks because they were in favor of start supporting a new studio made by Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising, who had recently quit Looney Tunes. I don't know the real reason why. And they created their own series of cartoons. But Iwerks still had Celebrity Pictures, so this is probably one of the most innovative parts of Iwerks' career. He created these shorts called Comic Colors, which are basically like Silly Symphonies, except they're not. But it was during this time that Iwerks designed the first multiplane camera. The idea of a multiplane camera is it takes multiple drawings and kind of photographs them to create a 3D effect. So it turns out that Disney was designing one first, but Iwerks was able to actually complete it before him using old Chevrolet parts. And then the last Comic Color cartoons were made in 1936, and finally Iwerks Studio couldn't find anything to replace it, so it finally defaulted and then went out of business. So then, yeah, I know, I wish it still existed today. So then Iwerks kind of just drifted from studio to studio during doing directorial work. I mean, what better director to have on your staff than Ub Iwerks, a man who is like super engrossed in animation and knows what's what. So most of the former Iwerks studio staff went to Looney Tunes, and I would definitely say that they took Iwerks' animation style with them, and I think that definitely impacted the kind of animation style of Looney Tunes, especially in the 40s and stuff. So Iwerks became a director of 4 Looney Tunes shorts, as you can see here and here, and then he also did directorial work for the Color Rhapsody shorts, which weren't really kind of important, but interesting. So, after 10 years of being apart with Disney, Walt Disney's friend was like, hey, Ub Iwerks is out of a job. And Disney rehired Iwerks after a 10-year absence. So, Disney was so overjoyed to have Iwerks back on the staff that he basically gave Iwerks free reign over whatever he wanted. So by this time, Iwerks became more interested in special effects than animation. So his first project was combining live-action animation used in Sound of the South, kind of one step up from what he did in the Alice comedies. And this is probably one of Iwerks' most important feats. He worked with the Xerox Creation to develop the xerographic process for animation. So he basically created Xerox for animation. I believe he called it an optical printer, in which instead of having the animator painstakingly draw out the same thing twice, he could just do it once and then use the optical printer to create duplicates. So I believe the first movie of The Parent Trap used Iwerks' camera technology, because I believe the twins were actually played by one person.
Lindsay Lohan.
Yep, that was Iwerks who did that. And so he also designed various Disney theme park attractions when Disneyland was about to come out. And I think he actually designed the animatronics. I don't know if he actually did like the Hall of Presidents, but I think he actually designed the first animatronics for that. And his special effects expertise was so well known now that he got the attention of even Alfred Hitchcock, who hired him to do special effects for The Birds, and that gave Iwerks an Academy Award nomination. Unfortunately, Iwerks didn't win, but it's just an honor just to be nominated, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, here's Iwerks with the camera, here's Iwerks at his nomination, and then here's him he's demonstrating a sodium vapor process for animation. So basically, in the old days,
wait, one sec. Wait.